When we are live, you just say so to us, ok, Pamela? Quando a gente estiver ao vivo, você fala pra gente, tá, Pamela?
Estamos ao vivo.
Okay, so Heather, we are live now, and well, first of all, let me say good evening for everyone. Today is a very exciting day for us in the Scimple Journal Club, actually, because it's our first meeting with an international guest, and with the official language being in English. But don't be shy if you are following us and English cannot be so easy for you. You can follow the description in the video, and we have like a tool that you can keep open in your browser so you can see the captions in Portuguese. Heather, I'm just going to translate this little piece so people can understand what they can do to follow with the captions, ok? Uhum. Então, pessoal, boa noite. Essa é a nossa primeira reunião internacional, que vai ser em inglês, tá bom? Mas se você tiver algum problema em entender o que está rolando por causa do inglês, etc., sem problemas, dá uma olhada na descrição aqui embaixo do vídeo, que vai ter explicando para vocês como fazer, para poder deixar no seu navegador aberta uma ferramenta que, conforme ela vai falando, vai escrevendo o que ela está falando, e você pode ir copiando e colando no seu tradutor aí online de preferência, para você ir acompanhando em português, tá bom? A gente só não vai fazer a tradução simultânea, porque a gente tem também pouco tempo e tal, e a gente não colocou o subtítulo direto no vídeo, porque como a gente pretende colocar ele depois na gravação, senão ia ficar subtítulo em cima de subtítulo. Por isso que a gente está fazendo dessa forma. Mas sem problema, é só você usar a ferramenta lá para ir acompanhando em português. So if you have questions, you can ask in the chat. If you have comments, you can do your comments in the chat, and I will take a note of it, and I will address the question or the comment to Heather in the appropriate time. Então, se você tiver algum comentário ou alguma pergunta, não tem problema, você pode fazer em português mesmo no chat, tá? Que a gente vai aqui tomando nota, e na hora apropriada ali, quando der um tempinho, a gente vai fazer a pergunta para a Heather, tá? Eu traduzo, não precisa estar em inglês, você pode colocar em português, a gente traduz, pergunta para ela, e aí ela, obviamente, ela vai responder em inglês, e aí a resposta, já que você fez uma pergunta direta, a resposta eu traduzo para vocês também, a parte que ela falar da resposta em relação à sua pergunta, tá bom? Então aí dá para todo mundo participar. Vamos ver essa experiência, né? Mas eu acredito que vai dar para todo mundo participar numa boa, mesmo aqueles que talvez não tenham tanta familiaridade com o inglês. Ok, so now I'm going to ask Heather to introduce herself, and after her introduction, you can start just straightforward with your presentation if you want. And if you have comments or questions, just ask, and we are here to help with the system if something is not working fine or something like that. And so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Louis. Thank you everyone for joining me today and for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. So my name is Heather Hollman, and I'm just about to start my PhD in kinesiology in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. So we're the farthest west in Canada. And I will be focusing on the promotion of physical activity in postpartum women with lumbopelvic pain. I just completed my master's last year, and it was during my master's that I did the study that I'll be presenting today. And I'm also a chiropractor, so I worked as a chiropractor for 6 years in Vancouver, where I managed a wide range of musculoskeletal conditions, including many running injuries. And I'm a runner myself and have volunteered as a run leader for over 10 years, from beginner runners to more advanced runners. I've never had the pleasure of traveling to Brazil yet, but it looks like there are a lot of beautiful parks in Sao Paulo or Palu. I especially saw the Pico de Yaharagua. It looks like there's some nice hiking and trail running, so I hope to check that out one day. Okay, so I guess I'll move on to my presentation. So I'll start the screen share. Okay. All right. I'm going to be presenting my study called The Effects of Tailored Advice on Injury Prevention Knowledge and Behaviors in Runners, a secondary analysis from a randomized controlled trial. And I completed this study along my two supervisors, Drs. Alison Ezet and Alex Scott, and also had some help from Drs. Jean-Francois Escalier and Dr. Paul Gustafson. And just a brief overview of my study. I'll be introducing the problem that we were addressing, as well as providing some background literature. I'll give our study purpose, go through our methods, findings, strengths, and limitations, and then end with our conclusion. And then after the presentation, hopefully I will have a chance to answer any questions, or we can have a discussion of any areas that may not have been clear. So the problem that we were looking at was running-related injuries. And as most of us know, running is a popular and easily accessible form of physical activity associated with many health benefits. However, it is also associated with a high incidence of injury. A recent systematic review found as many as 7.8 running injuries per 1,000 hours of running in novice runners, and 7.7 running injuries per 1,000 hours of running in recreational runners. Running injuries, they decrease our ability to accomplish goals. They decrease the ability to participate in physical activity for optimal health. And they've been shown to lead to costs such as increased healthcare utilization and workplace absenteeism. So when I was doing my literature search, this was done back in 2018, but I believe the main risks are still the same today. And so what I found was that having a prior injury in the past 12 months, running too much, too fast, being a newer runner, so having minimal running experience. And then there were a few gender-specific factors. So having a high body mass index and a high peak braking force, maybe a higher risk in females specifically. And then leading on to prevention interventions. So there was the most recent Cochrane review I could find was from 2011. They looked at 25 intervention studies, and they didn't find any of the interventions to be effective. However, since then, a number of studies have been done, and I was able to find that wearing comfortable running shoes, alternating between at least 2 different pairs of running shoes, cross-training with an activity other than running, interval training using different speeds of running, and maintaining an increase in running load of under 30% or ideally 10% per week. There was some evidence to show that these interventions were effective. More recently, we've started to see some multifactorial running injury prevention intervention studies. So in 2014, Adrian Sens et al., they found that a multifactorial prevention intervention was effective on determinants and actual performance of running injury prevention behaviors. And then I was especially excited while we were doing our literature search to find that Dr. Hespanhol Jr. And his co-authors in 2018 found that a multifactorial running injury prevention protocol resulted in a decrease in running injury prevalence in a cohort of trail runners. However, to my knowledge, there wasn't any significant effect on determinants or behaviors of the running injury prevention in the participants. As far as we were aware, there was no study to date that had looked at the effectiveness of a tailored multifactorial advice on running injury prevention knowledge or behaviors in recreational road runners training for a 10-kilometer road race. And so we decided to apply a similar intervention to what was performed in this study to our specific participants. So the participants in our study were from the SportMed BC Vancouver Sunrun in training program. And this is a 13-week graduated running program, and it's been running for over 30 years. There's 55 clinics across our province of British Columbia for both beginner and experienced runners who want to complete a 10-kilometer road race, the Vancouver Sunrun. And it was designed specifically by sport medicine professionals and researchers to prevent running injuries. However, a study in 2003 did find a running incidence of 29.5% in this clinic. In the literature, running incidence has been reported, I think, anywhere between 10 and 90%. So this falls kind of right in the middle of that, but it still would be nice if we could find a way to bring this incidence, closer to the 10%. So our study purpose was to determine whether biweekly tailored online advice, in addition to general advice at baseline, was more effective than general advice at baseline alone for enhancing running injury prevention knowledge and behaviors and reducing the prevalence and incidence of running injuries in runners training with the in-training program. So we did a randomized controlled trial with online survey research, and it ran between January and April of 2018 for the 13 weeks of the in-training program. Each of the 55 clinics had one clinic coordinator and 5 to 10 volunteer run leaders, and each clinic had between 10 and 50 running participants. And we did our recruitment through the clinic coordinators during weeks 1 to 3 of the program. So we asked the clinic coordinators to email out a web link of our study information and online consent form to their runners in their kind of weekly emails that they're always sent. Participants could be included in our study if they were in one of the 3 programs of the in-training program, if they were over 18 years of age, if they filled our online consent form and gave us their email address. They were excluded if they were a clinic coordinator or run leader, if they had a running injury at the beginning of the study, or if they sustained one during the first 3 weeks, because this was prior to the commencement of our intervention. So before the in-training program began, we randomly and blindly allocated the 55 clinics into intervention and control group. And originally they were balanced and stratified by clinic size, because originally we were going to do a randomized cluster trial. After statistical analysis, we found that the cluster effect wasn't significant, which meant that we could analyze our data based on the unit, so just the individual person. Blinding was not completely possible since we informed our participants in the online consent that they would either be receiving advice, biweekly advice or not. However, our biostatistician was blinded, and we did have all analyzed results with identifying information removed. Okay, so now I'll describe our intervention. And if you're familiar with the study that Dr. Hespanhol Jr. Did, you'll notice it is very similar. So we did it based on the intervention used in that study, as well as any other up-to-date evidence that we could find for the prevention of running injuries. So on weeks 1 to 3, after recruitment, all participants were given general running injury prevention advice. And then on weeks 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, only the intervention group was given bi-weekly tailored running injury prevention advice. And similar to the intervention from Hespanhol Jr., we used the Oslo Sports Trauma Research Center questionnaire for health problems to come up with a score that would give the participant a running injury status of either no running injury, non-substantial running injury, or a substantial running injury. And basically, if they had no running injury, they were given the general advice again. And if they had a non-substantial or substantial running injury based on their score, then we provided them with tailored advice that was slightly different from the general advice. So for our general advice, it was given to everyone at the beginning and then given to people who scored no running injury. And it had 4 main themes. So know your risks. Basically, if you're new to running, it's important to follow a graduated program. And if you have a history of running injury in the past 12 months, it's important to make sure it's properly recovered. The second was to wear the right shoes. So to wear shoes that are comfortable and to alternate between at least 2 different pairs of shoes. Third was manage your load. So to include warm-ups and cool-downs for the sessions, to include interval training in some of the sessions, volume and intensity progression of no more than 10% per week, and to include some cross-training in the running program. So to do some activities that weren't running, like cycling or swimming. Then the fourth one was listen to your body. So if you kind of just asking people to check in each week to make sure they weren't feeling overloaded and maybe to cut back a little bit if they found that they weren't recovering very well. Then for non-substantial and substantial running injuries, we gave slightly different advice. So first was to seek advice from a health practitioner. Second was to reduce their training volume and intensity until they could run without any pain. If they weren't able to run without pain at all, we told them to take time off from running completely. So for non-substantial, we recommended take 1 to 2 weeks off. And for substantial running injuries, we recommended to take 2 to 4 weeks off. And we recommended for them to cross-train while they weren't running, so with a sport other than running that didn't cause them pain. And then once they were able to start again, we recommended that they restart with a gradual progression of running and to continue following the 4 components of the general advice.
Heather?
Mm-hmm.
May I ask you something?
Yeah.
So if you can go to your previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
So this is great how you organize your program, in my opinion. And one thing it's very interesting is the number 3 of the tailored advice, take time off. So this is actually thinking about recovery, am I right?
Yes.
That's great. And but actually I have 2 questions here, which is actually questions that some people ask me when I am presenting the Trail 6 study.
Okay. Yeah.
Because when you talk about loads, a lot of people keep in doubt about how we give advice on load. So, for example, in Trail 6, we actually did not advise a specific load for the runners, for the trail runners. We just asked them to try to prevent, to increase or decrease loads in a fast way. So just say, well, if you want to progress, just progress slowly. And if you stop running for a period of time, when you start again, you progress slowly again. We give this kind of advice. Can you elaborate just a little bit how you give advice on these 3 items in the general advice, which will be manage your load?
Yes, for sure. That's a great question. Thanks, Louis. So with the in-training program, everyone follows a certain 3 run per week program. And so it could be challenging for runners because they have this, this recipe to follow to complete a run, and then it doesn't really make sense if they're taking 2 to 4 weeks off from that recipe. They can't just sort of start back up at week 6 if they had to stop running at week 2, for example. The in-training program, they actually provided a return to run session for the clinic coordinators and run leaders. So if runners had to take time away from the program, they were supposed to follow this kind of modified version. And I believe that modified version was for maybe 2 weeks. And then after that, they were able to restart with the original program. I don't know off the top of my head. I know for sure that there wasn't one available for every week of the program. It was kind of a generic return. I think maybe in the first week, it asked people to just do half of what was recommended during that week, and maybe the next week to bump up to 75% of what was originally recommended. And then if they were still feeling good, then by the 3rd week, they could continue with the regular program that they were originally on. Unfortunately, we didn't we didn't collect any feedback of how this kind of gradual progression works or worked. And I know it can be a problem for a number of reasons, for injury, but also in our clinic, there's a lot of people that go on vacation for 2 weeks, and then they come back and they're not really sure how to restart the program. And there's only 13 weeks. So, and they would really want to run the sun run. So a lot of them would jump back into the program, which, may have resulted in injury because they weren't kind of maintaining the normal load for the 2 weeks prior. And I think it would be an area to look into more for sure. But just basically they did have a modified program that they were advised to use while returning to the running.
Wow, thank you for your answer. This is great. So actually, as you run the study with the training program, so actually the trainers in the training program were sort of managing the load of the runners who were in the event, if I understood right. And this is a good feature because then we could in the future, for example, we could try to replicate this study and actually monitor together with the trainers if the runners are actually taking this advice of managing your load. Because we were just, we asked in the Trail 6 study, we asked the runners if they took the advice or not. But it was about questioning. We just asked them, well, we take the advice or not. So it could be that one runner say, well, I did not, but I'm saying that I followed because I want to make the researchers happy or something like that.
Yeah.
It would be great if a third person, like a trainer, could monitor these and report to the researchers if the runners really take the advice or not. But this is great. And a second question that I would it's not a question actually, it's more like a comment because in our last meeting we just discussed about a systematic review that found that people, athletes actually, who train more than one sport, they have actually they are less likely to get injured than those who practice only one type of sport. And in your 4 item here in the tailored advice, this cross-training advice, I think this is very smart in this way of trying to change the load a little bit, So running, we know that's a kind of activity that you do the same thing from the beginning and to the end. So it's very, you don't change much what you do. So if you have another sport together with running, you could change the load a little bit, and this could have an effect. And this systematic review suggests that, yes, it has an effect. And I was very interested about it, and I did not have this evidence at the time that I actually proposed the Trail 6. You were aware of scientific evidence on this when you or your team included this 4 item, or this was just something that you thought about it and thought that was smart and included in the program?
Yeah, this is a good question because we were. I'm a chiropractor, and 3 of the other authors are physiotherapists as well as researchers. So we looked at this advice both from the eyes of researchers and from our own clinical practices. But I do believe there was a study that we used that we based that cross-training component on. And I'm just trying, I think actually in the study by, was it Malisu? He did this study on alternating between 2 different pairs of shoes. I believe in that study, they also looked at cross-training, and they found that, I believe it was a prospective observational study. They found that runners who cross-trained had a decreased incidence or prevalence of running injuries. But yeah, I would have to double check which study it was that we used it from, but I'm pretty sure it was that one.
Oh, but that's great. I mean, I want to congratulate you and your team because if I could go back in time, I think I would probably include this also in the tailored advice for the Trail 6. I think it's very smart. Congratulations.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see the multifactorial prevention. I think every 3 or 4 years it will change a bit or shift a bit based on what we find to be more or less effective. I know right at the same time that I published my study, another larger study was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, and they also looked at online multifactorial prevention. And I noticed they included a biomechanics component, so changing maybe your running cadence or changing the how heavy you run. And at the time that I did my literature review, I didn't find enough evidence to show that I could include that in my study. It still seemed like there were it wasn't necessarily preventing all types of injuries. Maybe it was preventing knee injuries, but not maybe calf or Achilles injuries. And but now it seems to be that more research is being done on running retraining and changing biomechanics. So perhaps there will be some piece about biomechanics that either will be added to everyone, or maybe it will have to be tailored to certain people that are maybe more susceptible to certain types of injuries is my thought. I don't know if you have any thought on that, Louis, because I know you have a lot of experience with running injuries and running injury research.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a long experience, but I certainly have an opinion on it. And I know this study is actually from our colleagues in the Netherlands.
Okay.
When I was in my PhD, I was at the Full University in Amsterdam, and this study was performed in Erasmus Medical Center in the Rotterdam city.
Okay.
And they have a very smart group there. I mean, they are but it turns out that their intervention was not effective, and our intervention was effective. So we are now in kind of thinking if, for example, the Trail 6 found something out of normal, or if they add something in their program that was actually not effective. And this biomechanic thing, I think that if you look at the literature, you see a pattern there that actually there are no very, very strong evidence or proven evidence that any biomechanical factor alone or in combination could prevent running injuries, but we don't have actually trials trying to address the problem. So it's not because you don't have the evidence that the effect is not there. I believe that it has, I think, in my opinion, it has something to be with biomechanics as well. We just don't know yet what variable or what measure of what biomechanical measure could moderate the effect of running-related injuries. So I agree with you. And maybe one path to follow is, because it's very difficult to run preventive trials, seeking only for one factor. I mean, it's a lot of people that you need to include in prevention trials, and it's taking a lot of time. And sometimes you just investigate one factor. It's complicated. So I think it might be, as running-related injuries multifactorial, it could be the case that we could include some biomechanical variables in the program. The point is that with this design, we will not answer the question, is biomechanics influencing running injuries? Because then we know that the package, all the program have some influence, but we don't know the specific components. And to do like a sensitivity analysis for each component, you need a population like for more than 10,000 people probably. So it's very complicated. But I do think that's a challenge that we need to address. I always talk to people here in Brazil who do biomechanics, and we always talk about trying to do something with epidemiology and biomechanics together. But of course, it's complicated. But let's see. Maybe in the future we can collaborate even with people in other countries like Canada and Netherlands. And if we join forces, maybe we can get the numbers we need and investigate all these factors and the influence of these factors on running injuries.
Yeah, you make such a good point of getting data from maybe multiple labs that use similar programs, and then being able to combine them into one study, because I know it seems like you have to collect so much data for some of those biomechanical studies that it would be very challenging to have hundreds or thousands of runners to be measuring.
Yes.
Another interesting part of that study, or with the online advice studies, it seems that I believe in the Trail 6 study and our study, the advice was always sent to the runner, the specific advice, but I think in some studies, the intervention group is given a website with all the information on it, and then runners can choose when they use the website or what parts of the website they may want to use. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if maybe the method of providing the intervention is just as important as what's actually in the intervention itself. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. It will be challenging though, because to monitor which components of the intervention they choose, it could be complicated, because if you manage online system, for example, we thought about doing like a Google Analytics of the pages, but then people could actually access the page but not follow the advice. And if you ask them, we will always have the bias of the reporting bias, actually. So they could report what we want to hear and not what they actually did. So it's complicated. It's also it's always going to have some bias involved, I think. But I think the way to do it is to join forces and collaborate and doing these things together and putting the sample sizes together, so we can get great numbers. And even if you have some bias with great numbers, it could be that this bias just fade away during the analysis, you know?
Yeah, and technology is advancing so much. Hopefully there will be, if everyone starts wearing a smartwatch, that's might make everything easier as far as tracking running time and tracking injuries and tracking behaviors that they're practicing in an attempt to prevent injuries. I think everything just needs to be simple. So hopefully technology will help us with that. So should I continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay, that's good. So alongside the intervention that we emailed out, we also emailed online questionnaires. On weeks 1 to 3, after agreeing to participate in the study, participants were sent a baseline questionnaire, and this included questions on personal demographics, running experience, the running program they were in, and a history of or any current running injuries they had. We also had a checkbox question that included running injury prevention knowledge and behaviors. So we asked, what do you think is effective for preventing and running injuries? And for behaviors, what do you actually do to prevent running injuries? Then on weeks 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, everyone was sent follow-up questionnaires monitoring how far they ran and whether they sustained a running injury. And then on weeks 13, we sent everyone a final questionnaire asking about running time and injuries, as well as the same checkbox question as the baseline questionnaire on running injury prevention knowledge and behaviors, as well as another checkbox question on the source of running injury prevention advice that they use most. And then an open-ended question asking participants if there was anything that prevented them from practicing the interventions that that we recommended for them. That was looking at barriers. So the entire study, we did look at running injury prevalence and incidence. However, for the sake of this publication, we focused on the running injury prevention knowledge and behaviors. So the between difference in correct responses. So we looked at each group and looked at their correct responses based on the most up-to-date evidence on the baseline questionnaire and compared that to correct responses on the final questionnaire and looked at which group had a bigger change in correct responses. Using a simple linear regression model, we used descriptive statistics for our sources of running injury prevention advice. And then for barriers preventing the practice of running injury prevention interventions, we used just a simple summary of common themes. We didn't do a full qualitative analysis because the majority of our participants said the same thing. So here's a flow of the clinics and participants of our study. So we start with 55 clinics from the top and then randomize them into 27 and 28 clinics in control and intervention groups. And then you can see at the bottom of the figure, just the circle in green, after we applied our exclusion criteria, we had 20 participants in the control group and 31 in the intervention group. And it was these participants that we used for our secondary analysis for knowledge and behaviors. So here's just an overview of some baseline characteristics of our participants. In our control and intervention groups, we had 80 and 68% females. In both groups, the mean age was late 40s, 48.8 and 48.9. The BMI was quite high, so 27.3 and 26.4 in intervention. So this is actually the overweight category. And 85% of the runners in the control group were either new to running or hadn't ran consistently in the past year. And 94% of the runners in the intervention group were either new to running or hadn't ran in the past year. Okay, so here's a table of the knowledge and behavior responses that we provided on the checkbox questions. So the ones in green are responses that at the time were supported by up-to-date evidence, and the ones in red were not supported by up-to-date evidence. And we found that for the running injury prevention knowledge responses, we found that the intervention group had a significantly higher change in correct responses. And as for behaviors, they did have more or a higher change of correct responses. However, as you can see from our p-value of 0.075, we couldn't say that this was statistically significant. As for sources of advice most used, 87% of the intervention group reported using the advice that we provided, and 45% of the control group said they used the advice that we provided. Other sources of advice that they also used were information given from their clinic coordinators. They were given weekly emails, so sometimes there was information in the weekly emails that was given from the in-training program itself, not from aside from our study. And I believe the third one was healthcare practitioners that came in to do talks at their clinics. As for barriers or things that prevented the runners from practicing what we recommended, the majority indicated nothing. So I think 91% said that nothing prevented them from practicing what we recommended. I think 2 people said they didn't have enough funding to afford a second pair of shoes, and 1 said that they didn't have enough time. These were interesting findings, the fact that such a high majority of the intervention group reported using our advice, and there were next to no barriers reported for practicing the advice. However, we didn't see a significant behavior change So I think it would be interesting in future studies to see if there's some other factor that we weren't addressing in this study, some maybe unconscious motivational or daily energy state, or maybe their positive or negative responses from previous behaviors that may have been at play here.
With Heather, with the Trail 6 study, we did the same question because we did find an effect in running-related injury, but we did not find an effect in behaviors. And then to explain that was very difficult, because then how you can change the risk of injury if you did not change behavior. So one of the things that we thought is that we measured behavior maybe in a non-appropriate way. And then we tried to do a secondary analysis on behavior. This is not published yet, but we did find an association between the way we measure the determinants of behavior and the preventive behavior itself. So then it's more challenging because now we know that there is an association between the determinants and the behavior, but this did not drive the change in running-related injury risk. So then I would say that your suggestion is a very smart one. So probably it's something that we did not address on behavior. So there are a lot of models, behavior change models. And in the Trail 6, we used the theory of playing behavior. And probably we should look for other factors. And you said brilliantly that maybe some factors that are unconscious and maybe not addressing these classical models like the theory of playing behavior could play a role. Because one thing that I just find difficult to accept is that we can change the risk of injury without changing behavior. I mean, this seems like a countersense.
Yeah, or perhaps there were certain behaviors that changed that that weren't recorded, or we don't know what those behaviors were. Because in your study, I believe you monitored their behavior every 2 weeks, right? Like every time you asked them for their injury status, they were also asked which intervention they were applying.
Yes, exactly. We asked for the next 2 weeks which one of these topics, and we showed them a drop-down list of all the topics of the program they followed. And it was like in the percentages of some of them were high and of some of them were low, as we expect. But we expected actually that we would not reach like 100% of one specifically advice. So when you see here your numbers of the intervention group, for example, following 87% of the advice, this to me seems like very reasonable, because you see, if you think of yourself as a runner and you are in this kind of program, so some weeks you just don't want to look at the internet or something like that, but you are still running. So and this, I think it's okay. But I think that if you sum up all the factors, maybe with not very high percentages, but if sum up all of them, this could drive some behavior change, in my opinion. So, and this is intriguing for me, because we could not actually show this in our study. Actually, show that there was no effect at all, and it probably was something with the measure or the outcomes we have chosen, or something like this.
Yeah, it'll be. I'm the supervisor that I'm doing my PhD under. He specializes in behavior change specific to physical activity, and so I'm hoping to find something within the research that I'm doing there that just might click, that could possibly be used for injury prevention or for promoting rehabilitation, as well as just general physical activity. So I'll definitely share that with you if I come across something that looks like it could be useful.
Great. But I think you did find something very interesting about knowledge. We did not measure knowledge, but we always thought that it could be knowledge driving the change in behavior. But we did not track that. Heather, we have a question here from the chat, and a participant here asked, how was the barriers assessed? If it was like an open question or a drop-down list question, multiple choice question?
They were asked if there was anything that prevented them from practicing the interventions, and then they had a blank space that they could write as much as they wanted in it. I'm not sure, maybe there was a word count limit, but they could just write whatever they wanted.
Oh, this is great, because they could actually, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that they did have to write something, so a lot of them did just write nothing or none.
Oh, this is great. This could reflect what they think, because sometimes when you have the drop-down options, maybe runners are thinking about other topics, but then they just choose one that is in there just to answer something. So this is a smart thing. So I think that's a very good way of doing it.
Yeah, and I know in it might be take more time to write or to answer open-ended questions than just to fill in the checkbox question. So I guess I'm sure there's other studies that participants might not choose to answer, the comments at the bottom. And so I definitely made sure that they weren't able to complete the questionnaire unless they kind of wrote some sort of word in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to strengths and limitations. So we had a high follow rate of 87, a mean of 87.6%. So this was the mean of the people answering the questionnaires that we gave out. We had concealment of clinic allocation to intervention and control group, and low type 1 error because of our significance of 0.05. Our limitations were a low response rate. This was surprising considering it was a simple online study. I think it was partly due to the fact that we only had 3 weeks of recruitment, and this was very specific for this in-training program because a lot of the runners only actually sign up for the program during the first 3 weeks. And so it wasn't really possible for us to start recruitment much before that. We had a short follow-up. I know a lot of running injury studies, they look at follow-up more at 6 months or a year, and we just looked at the end of the study or the end of the 13 weeks. And this was mainly because we just wanted to see if we could make a change within the in-training program itself. It's known that a lot of the runners that participate in the program, they actually stop running once they complete the Vancouver Sun Run 10-kilometer race. And so a lot of them might not be running months after that. But that was the reason for the shorter follow-up. And then for prevention level, we weren't able to determine whether our treatment effects were due to the fact that the advice was tailored or simply that there was a higher volume of advice given to the intervention group. And so in conclusion, we found that delivering an online running injury prevention program resulted in changes in running injury prevention knowledge and trended towards a change in behaviors. However, further study is needed to see if these observed trends can translate to a reduction in running injury prevalence, and to determine why runners might not practice recommended running injury prevention measures, especially if they are knowledgeable about up-to-date, effective injury prevention measures, and if they don't find that there's anything from preventing them from actually practicing them. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you so much for listening and following along. And I've really enjoyed the discussions that we've had so far. And I would be happy to clarify if I maybe spoke too fast in certain sections, or if you might have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather. It was very clear, very nice, and you talked slowly, so we could follow without any particular problem. We don't have more questions so far, but I have one last question.
Okay.
Which would be, so if I understood right, you also measured running-related injury, and you said in your methods that was prevalence and incidence. Did you analyze the effect of the intervention in the incidence or the prevalence of running-related injuries? And if you did, are you planning to publish, or you have published already this analysis?
We did, and the problem is our statistician said that we would need to have, I think, 900 participants in order to show any significant effects for our intervention on injury prevention. So I don't think we're planning on publishing that data because our sample size wasn't large enough. We did have a slightly lower injury prevalence and incidence in our intervention group, but since our numbers weren't close to 900, we won't be publishing that. So.
Okay, I got it. But it's interesting to know, though, because it could give us some insights for future studies or building future programs and implementing them in practice. That was an amazing project, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm really interested to learn how to increase the number of participants that will complete or participate in a study. I think perhaps for these runners, it's already a large step to be signing up for the in-training program, and maybe it was too much for them to, because there's over 1,000 runners in the program itself. But I think maybe it was just too much for them to sign up for a study as well as signing up for the program itself. So yeah, in future, I'd like to see if there's other ways that we could make our recruitment more effective, I guess, so that we could show a measure of these changes.
Luiz, posso fazer uma pergunta?
Yes, Heather, we may have a question here from our students. So she's going to do the question in Portuguese, then I translate, okay?
Okay, great.
And if I ask you to, if you can stop sharing, so we can
great.
Chat with the video on now. And, Fernanda, pode fazer a pergunta.
Na verdade, Luiz, é a pergunta em relação ao que você falou. Eles não conseguiram avaliar bem a prevalência por conta das múltiplas variáveis ou por causa do N, ou pelas duas coisas.
Okay. So Heather, the question is about if you did not analyze the run-related injury data because you have difficulties in the data collection or because of the N, the number of runners. So you did answer that already, so I'm going just to repeat in Portuguese, okay?
Yeah.
Então, Fernanda, foi por causa, assim, eles mediram, eles não tiveram problema em medir prevalência, nem incidência, nem nada. Ela explicou que, na verdade, o que aconteceu foi que o estatístico que está fazendo a análise para eles chegou à conclusão que para eles poderem ter um poder estatístico para poder ver o efeito, eles teriam que ter pelo menos 900 pessoas, 900 corredores no estudo. Então, como se chegou à conclusão lá no time dela, no time de pesquisa dela, que não teria pessoas o suficiente para essa análise, eles provavelmente não vão publicar esse dado. Mas ela comentou que mesmo com um dado não publicado e talvez com essa falta de poder, ela se lembra que o grupo com intervenção teve um pouco menor risco em comparação com o grupo controle, sim. Agora, se isso foi estatisticamente significante ou se isso pode ter inferência para outros estudos, aí ela não pode afirmar por causa do tamanho da amostra. Respondeu a pergunta?
Respondeu. Obrigada, Luiz.
Nada. Great. So, do we have any more questions? In the chat here, I think we are done, right? Okay. So,
Louis, I have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
I just wanted to hear your opinion on the running. So for running injuries, we use the consensus definition of running-related musculoskeletal pain in the lower limbs that causes restriction on or stoppage of running for at least 7 days or 3 consecutive scheduled training sessions, or that requires the running to consult a physician or other health professional. And I thought that, so the fact that this definition includes that you would say you have an injury if you consulted a health professional about something. If we had enough runners, I thought that might be an issue of possibly over-reporting, just because in my own practice, I saw a lot of runners that didn't necessarily have a full-blown injury that stopped them from running. They maybe just needed some general maintenance that enabled them. And they did have kind of episodic pain. But according to this definition, if they have some symptoms and they're seeking help from a health professional, then they should be reporting having a running injury. And I'm just wondering if this is going to affect the prevalence and incidence that we see in the literature. I'm wondering if that thought crossed your mind at all, or
Yeah. Well, I am a physical therapist, so these issues is always concerning me, and we did thought about it. So I think it depends on the context. So, for example, if you want to do a study to analyze the factors that are associated with running injuries in a cause-effective way, I would say that taking this definition of medical attention or missing running days, this could be good, because then you are certain that when you have your outcome is really an injury.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of these intervention studies, when we want to prevent running-related injuries, so actually it's preferable to have the injury in the onset or close to the onset. So in this sense, I think that taking a less rigorous definition would be better, because then you can recognize the injury before they are severe enough to be reported to a medical, to a health professional, for example, or severe enough to make the runner stop running or missing days of running practice. The problem is that most of running-related injuries are overuse. At least we have evidence on this, and then even with this approach, one could say that when the runner report injury in our questionnaire, even if this is not a medical attention or a missing running days severity, still it could be far away from the onset. I mean, this runner could have this injury for a long time ago, and they are just reporting right now for you. So this problem will always be there. So my approach right now for this is that when I conduct studies on running-related injuries, I did longitudinal studies on running-related injuries, I take the less rigorous definition, and then when I analyze the data, I do a sort of a sensitivity analysis, and I analyze, for example, if I change the definition for a medical attention one, this would change the results or not. If I change the definition for missing running days, for example, this would change the results, yes or no. And with this, we can have more information about the effect of some interventional running-related injuries, and also with the cause and effect problem that I told you before. So if you just collect data on the more rigorous definition, then you can do the sensitivity analysis. So I cannot answer what is the best way of doing it. So what I would say, because you just need to collect data once, and if you collect the data with the less rigorous one, then in the analysis you can just filter the analysis. So I think that will be the best option right now to follow.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you for your participation, and let me say that we had a very pleasant time, and if you are always welcome to participate in other meetings with other participants as well. All international people from overseas can participate. So let's say that you are in the chat in a meeting that's happening in Portuguese. Just let me know that you are there, and you are going to translate the best we can so you can participate. And when you wish to participate here with the video also to talk to us about something, you are always welcome. And I also want to thank all the participants in the chat and that are here in our online environment as well. A special thanks to my master's students that organized all the online environment. And I just want to remember that all are welcome, and we are doing our best to translate it the best we can for other languages as well. Let's say that there are some Russian here that want to follow. We can just try to translate with the tools we have. I think we are trying to be as inclusive as we can. And I think we can finish if you don't have any other commentaries or questions. No? Okay, so sorry, Heather, you have some...
Oh, I just want to say thank you again so much for having me, and yeah, hopefully I will be able to join in on listening to some other speakers in the future.
Yeah, great. So Pamela, if you want to finish the streaming, and guys in the chat, we see each other again 2 weeks by now.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.